My husband said, "My parents think you're a burden." And honestly, I agree. I said, "Good to know." I didn't react. Got it. That night, I made a plan. But at Sunday dinner, when his father suddenly stood up, looked at him, and asked a question that turned the whole table silent, his smile vanished instantly. "My name is Clara Whitfield and I'm 35 years old." 2 weeks ago, my husband looked me in the eye, set his fork down like he was closing a negotiation, and said, "My parents think you're a burden." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't flinch. He just watched me across our kitchen table, waiting for me to crack. I didn't. "Good to know," I said. That was it. No screaming, no thrown plates, just 3 words that tasted like metal in my mouth. Ethan and I had been married for 6 years. We met in our late 20s at a mutual friend's birthday party. He was the charming pharmaceutical sales rep with the tailored shirt and easy laugh. I was the high school history teacher who smelled faintly of dry erase markers and coffee. We dated for 2 years, got married, bought a house in the suburbs. No kids yet, but we talked about it. Or at least we used to. Ethan traveled a lot for work, regional conferences, hospital dinners, territory development. He made more money than I did. His bonuses alone sometimes equaled half my yearly salary. I never resented that. I liked my job. I liked my students. I liked that my life had a rhythm. Grading, lesson plans, after-school club meetings. It wasn't glamorous, but it was solid. Ethan's parents, Leonard and Diane, came from a different world. Leonard ran a commercial real estate company. Diane was a retired corporate attorney. They had money, opinions, and a talent for making compliments sound like corrections. From the beginning, I could feel their disappointment humming under their polite smiles. A teacher, Diane had said the first time Ethan brought me to Sunday dinner, "That's noble, like a consolation prize." Leonard always asked pointed questions about Ethan's trajectory, future promotions, investment opportunities, whether he'd ever considered starting his own firm. When he turned to me, the questions were softer but carried the same weight. "Does the district pay enough for you two to save? Have you thought about going into administration? They make more, you know." No one ever said outright that their son could have done better. They didn't need to. For the first few years, Ethan was my buffer. He'd squeeze my knee under the table, change the subject, tease his mom until she laughed and backed off. But about 4 months ago, something shifted. It started as little comments. "Don't you want more than this, Clara?" he asked one night as I graded essays at the kitchen table. "More than what?" I said, pen hovering over a student's paragraph about the Cold War. The same salary forever, the same routine. We could have a better life if you thought about other options. I tried to laugh it off. "I like my life." "Yeah, but you could like it more." He started criticizing the house, our savings, my reluctance to pick up extra certifications that might bump my pay by a few hundred a year. I tried to talk to him. "What's really going on? Is this about money, or is something else bothering you?" He'd shrug it off. "I'm just stressed about work. Don't make it a big deal." I wanted to believe him. I did for a while. Then came the Wednesday night argument. I forgot to pick up his dry cleaning. That's it. 1 bag of shirts. By the time we hit the second round of leftover pasta, it had turned into a character assassination. "You're so unreliable," he said, standing at the sink, stacking plates a little too hard. "You don't take our life seriously." "It's dry cleaning, Ethan. I'll get it in the morning." "It's not about the shirts. It's about everything. You don't push yourself. You don't push us. You're just content." He said the word like it tasted bad. And that makes me what, exactly? He exhaled sharply, like he'd been holding something in for months. "My parents think you're a burden on me," he said. "And honestly, Clara, I'm starting to agree with them." The kitchen went very quiet. The dishwasher hummed. A car passed outside. I felt something in my chest go still, like a heart dropping into cold water. "Good to know," I said. "That's it?" His eyes narrowed. "That's all you have to say?" "What do you want me to say, Ethan?" "You just told me you think I'm a burden. There's not really a script for that. Maybe defend yourself. Maybe try to prove them wrong." "Why would I need to prove anything?" I asked, and my voice surprised even me. Calm, almost detached. "I work. I contribute. I'm a good wife. If you and your parents don't see that, that's not my problem to fix. He stared at me like I'd given the wrong answer on a test he'd designed. You're so passive, he said finally. That's the whole problem. That night, I slept in the guest room. The next morning, Ethan acted like nothing had happened. He kissed the top of my head on his way out, grabbed his travel mug, and said, "I'll be home late. Dinner with a client." I didn't bring it up either, but something had shifted in me. Once someone calls you a burden, you can't unhear it. It sits in the room with you between the coffee mugs and the unpaid bills watching. That Friday was a professional development day at school. No students, just meetings. We got out early. I came home around 3, kicked off my shoes, and went into the small room we called my office. Really, just a desk, a bookshelf, and a plant I'd somehow managed not to kill yet. I was answering emails when I heard the front door open. "Ethan," I called. He didn't answer, but I heard his voice in the kitchen a moment later, low and casual. He didn't know I was home. "Hey, Mom," he said. "Yeah, I talked to her." I froze, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. "I told her what you and Dad said," he continued. "That she's a burden. She just accepted it. Didn't even fight back. I think she knows she's not pulling her weight, but she's too comfortable to change anything." The words hit me like ice water down my spine. I stood up and moved closer to the doorway, out of sight. "I know," he said. "I'm tired of it too. Sunday dinner. Yeah, we'll be there. I think it's time we all had a frank conversation about the future." A frank conversation about the future. I stood there staring at the wall, listening to my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. He wasn't just venting to his parents. He was building a case, laying a foundation, getting the jury on his side before I even knew there was a trial. When he hung up, I went back into my office and closed the door quietly. For a few minutes, I just stood at the window watching our street. Kids on scooters, a dog walker, the mail truck, normal life. My life was about to stop being normal. I didn't confront him. Not then. Instead, I did something I'd never done before. I picked up my phone and called Leonard. He answered on the second ring, his voice crisp and surprised. "Clara, this is unexpected." "Hi, Leonard," I said. "Do you have a few minutes?" "Of course." "Is everything all right?" "I'm not sure," I said. "Ethan mentioned that you and Diane have concerns about me, about whether I'm the right partner for him. I wanted to hear that directly from you instead of through him." There was a pause long enough for me to count 3 full breaths. "I think that's a conversation we should have in person," he said carefully. "Why don't we talk at dinner on Sunday?" "That's fine," I replied. "But I need to know one thing now." "All right. Do you think I'm a burden on your son?" Silence again, longer this time. When he finally spoke, his voice had shifted into that measured businesslike tone he used when discussing market trends. "I think you're a good person, Clara," he said, "but I also think Ethan is a man with potential. He's ambitious. He could go much further in his career. He was raised with a certain lifestyle, certain expectations. Teaching is admirable, but it's limiting financially in terms of what you can build. So, you do think I'm holding him back?" I said, "I think," Leonard replied, "that he deserves a partner who matches his drive and financial capability. Someone who can move in the same circles he does. And you've been discussing this with him." "We discuss everything with our son. We're a close family." "Got it," I said. "We'll see you Sunday." When I hung up, my hands were shaking. I stood there for a long time staring at my reflection in the dark computer screen. A woman with tired eyes and a coffee stain on her sweater. A woman who paid her share of the mortgage, contributed to the retirement accounts, packed lunches, graded papers at midnight, and still somehow ended up labeled as dead weight. Something in me hardened. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the name I was looking for. Naomi Blake. We'd gone to college together. I'd become a teacher. She'd gone into law enforcement, then left to become a licensed private investigator. We hadn't talked in over a year, just the occasional birthday text. I hit call. Clara. Naomi answered on the second ring. "Wow, long time." "Hey," I said, surprised at how steady my voice sounded. "Do you still take cases that involve spouses?" She was quiet for a beat. "If you're asking what I think you're asking, yeah, what's going on?" "My husband's been traveling a lot for work," I said. He's suddenly very concerned about my ambition level, and he just told me his parents think I'm a burden. I overheard him on the phone planning a big talk at Sunday dinner about our future. I don't have proof of anything, but my gut, I swallowed. My gut is loud right now. Naomi exhaled. All right, give me details. Full name, company, where he's been in the last few months. I'll see what I can find. Travel records, hotel stays, anything unusual. I told her everything. When I finish, she said, I'll send you whatever I get by tomorrow night. Thank you, I whispered. Clara, she added, her voice softening. Whatever I find, you're not crazy for wanting to know the truth. That night, Ethan was working late. I didn't ask questions. I lay in bed in the guest room, staring at the ceiling, feeling the shape of my life shifting under me like tectonic plates. Memories flooded back. Ethan holding my hand during our wedding vows, laughing with my students on career day, Diane's tight smile when she asked if I ever regretted settling for teaching. I'd always assumed the story we were living was good enough for both of us. I was starting to realize Ethan had been rewriting it without telling me. Saturday night around 10, my phone buzzed. Naomi had sent me a file. I opened it and scrolled. Hotel receipts in cities where Ethan had supposedly been for work. Always 2-night stays. Nicer hotels than his company usually booked. Charges at restaurants almost always for 2. And a name that appeared over and over again. Vanessa Morales, Regional Sales Director, Ethan's superior. And according to a note Naomi had included at the bottom of the report, his ex-girlfriend from before he met me, married, 2 kids. I sat there, the blue light from my phone turning the room eerie and cold while my brain tried to make the pieces fit. The timing lined up almost perfectly. About 4 months of hotel stays and dinners. 4 months of Ethan's growing contempt. 4 months of me slowly turning into the burden he needed me to be so he could justify whatever story he was telling himself. I didn't sleep much that night. By Sunday afternoon, I was calm. Too calm. Ethan knocked on the guest room door as I was finishing my makeup. You ready? He asked. I looked at him in the mirror. The man I'd promised to love, who'd spent months rehearsing a version of our marriage, where I was dead weight, and he was the martyr. Yeah, I said. Let's go to dinner. If he noticed the way my voice had changed, he didn't say anything. We got in the car, he drove. I watched our quiet neighborhood roll by. The same one I'd driven through 1,000 times, except now everything looked slightly off, like the saturation had been turned down. He cleared his throat. My parents just want what's best for us, he said. Let's try to keep an open mind tonight. Oh, I said softly. I'm very open, Ethan. I rested my hand on the door handle, feeling the leather under my fingers. And thought you wanted a frank conversation about the future. You're going to get one. Just not the way you planned. Leonard and Diane lived in a neighborhood where every lawn looked like it had a personal stylist. The kind of place where hedges were trimmed into perfect shapes and driveways, or pressure washed within an inch of their lives. As we pulled up, their stone front house glowed warmly in the early evening light. Something between a welcome and a warning. Ethan put the car in park and sat there for a second, hands on the wheel. Can we just not be defensive tonight? He said. I looked at him. Are you expecting me to be on trial? He forced a laugh. No, my parents care about us. They want to help us think long term. You mean, like a frank conversation about the future? I asked. His eyes flicked toward me just for a moment. You overheard that? You were in the kitchen? I said, our house isn't that big. He swallowed, then leaned over and kissed my cheek. It felt like a reflex, not affection. Let's just get through dinner. We walked up the front steps together, the way we always had, but I felt like I was walking into a courtroom where everyone already had a copy of a file about me that I'd never seen. Diane opened the door before we could knock. Sweetheart, she said, kissing Ethan's cheek. Hi, Clara. Her eyes skimmed over my dress. Simple, navy, comfortable. The corner of her mouth tightened for half a second before the smile snapped back in place. Inside, the house smelled like roasted garlic and something expensive. The dining table was set for 8. Ethan's older sister Morgan was already there with her husband Tyler. They stood when we walked in. Hey, Morgan said, hugging Ethan. Then she turned to me softer. Hi, Clara. You look nice. Thanks, I said. I believed her. Morgan was one of the few people in that family who seemed more human than performance. Drinks? Diane asked, already moving toward the bar cart. Just water for me, I said. Red? Ethan said. Something full-bodied, of course. We made small talk in the living room. Leonard asked about my classes, not really listening to the answer. Diane asked Ethan about his latest numbers, actually listening to that answer. I watched Ethan glide through the conversation, charming, articulate, the golden son. If you didn't know him, if you didn't know about the hotel receipts and Vanessa Morales, you'd think he was perfect. Dinner started out normal. Salad, light jokes, the clink of silverware against china. At one point Morgan caught my eye and gave me a little smile, like she could feel something in the air too, but didn't know what it was yet. Halfway through the main course, Ethan cleared his throat. Here we go, I thought. So, he said, setting his fork down. Mom, Dad, everyone. I wanted to talk about something important. Diane placed her napkin delicately on the table. Of course, honey. What is it? Ethan glanced at me and then at his parents. His expression solemn, almost pained. The performance was good. If I hadn't seen the receipts, I might have believed him. Claire and I have been having some conversations about our future, he said, about what we both want and whether we're aligned. I took a sip of water and looked at my plate. He continued, I think everyone knows things have been tense lately, we're in different places. I'm trying to build something financially, professionally. I want more. And Clara. He hesitated, as if searching for the most sympathetic wording. Seems content where she is, he finished. Which is fine, but it doesn't match what I need from a partner. I feel like I'm carrying most of the weight. The room went quiet. Morgan's fork paused mid-air. Tyler shifted in his chair. Diane looked genuinely concerned, but not about me. I just think, Ethan went on, that we have to be honest about whether this marriage is working for either of us. Leonard set his fork down very carefully. Ethan, he said, voice low, maybe this isn't the right time. No, Dad, Ethan replied quickly. I think it is. We're family. You've seen what's going on. You've heard some of it. You know I've been struggling. I want your input. He looked around the table, inviting judgment. I stayed silent. I could feel every eye on me, waiting for my explosion, my meltdown, the dramatic scene that would prove Ethan's case. I took another sip of water, so Ethan said, turning back to me like a director cueing an actress. Maybe we should talk about whether this marriage is still viable. Are you asking for a divorce? I asked, my voice even. He hesitated just enough to show he hadn't planned this line thoroughly. I'm saying, he replied, that we should consider it realistically. You're not driven the way I am. You don't care about building wealth. You're okay with just coasting. He spread his hands as if presenting evidence. And you've been discussing this with your parents, I said. For how long? That's not fair, Ethan said quickly. It seems fair to me, I replied. You just announced to your whole family that you might want to divorce me because I'm not ambitious enough, and this is the first I'm hearing about it in this level of detail. Diane spoke up then, voice soft and syrupy. Clara, sweetheart, this isn't about attacking you. We all care about you. We just want what's best for Ethan, and for you, of course. I turned to her. You called me a burden. Her eyes widened. I never you did, I said. You might not have said it to my face, but you said it to your son, and he brought it home. Her mouth opened and closed. I think, Lon cut in, his voice suddenly sharper than I'd ever heard it. We need to pause for a moment. He pushed his chair back and stood up. The whole table went silent. Even the sound from the kitchen, the faint clatter of dishes, seemed to disappear. Leonard didn't look at me. He looked at Ethan. Son, he said, I need to ask you something and I need you to answer honestly. Ethan blinked. Okay. Who is Vanessa Morales? The name hit the table like a dropped glass. The color drained from Ethan's face so fast it was almost fascinating. Who? He stammered. Vanessa Morales, Leonard repeated calmly. Regional sales director at your company. Your ex-girlfriend. Married. 2 children. You've been spending quite a bit of time with her recently. Business dinners, hotel stays, nicer properties than your company typically approves for standard travel. Ring any bells? Diane's head snapped toward her husband. Leonard, What on earth? I'm talking to our son, he said without looking at her. Ethan, it's not. Ethan's lips moved, searching for a sentence and finding none. Dad, it's not what you think. Then what is it? Leonard asked. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've been having an affair with your married ex-girlfriend while telling us that your wife is deadweight holding you back. The room detonated. Diane started talking over him, demanding details. Morgan whispered, "Oh my God," under her breath. Tyler stared at his plate like it might offer an escape route. I just sat very still. How did you? Ethan choked off the question halfway. Leonard finally looked at me. Clara called me on Friday, he said. Told me you'd said we thought she was a burden. She wanted to hear it from me directly. When I hung up, I started thinking about some things that didn't add up. Your trips getting longer, the hotel names on the company statements, the way you talked about Clara like she was some anchor weighing you down. His eyes returned to Ethan. So, I made some calls, Leonard continued. I still have friends in accounting at your company. I asked a few questions. Expenses are very revealing, you know. Ethan swallowed. His hand shook slightly as he reached for his wine glass, then pulled it back. It was work, he said weakly. We were traveling for work. Work? Leonard repeated. Is that what you call 2-night stays at luxury hotels when the rest of your team is at the Marriott? Or the dinners charged for 2 at restaurants that don't even have private rooms for clients? Or the fact that your calendar mysteriously clears whenever Vanessa happens to be in the same city? Diane was staring at Ethan now, horrified. Tell me this isn't true, she whispered. Mom, He dragged his hands through his hair. It just happened. Okay. It wasn't serious. It was nothing just happens. Leonard snapped. You made choices. You chose to carry on with a married woman while lying to your wife. You chose to come into my house tonight and try to paint Clara as the problem to make us all believe that she was holding you back so you could feel justified in whatever you were planning to do next. Ethan's eyes flashed with something. Anger, shame, panic. Dad, you're blowing this out of proportion. He said, Clara and I have had issues for a long time. She's never supported my ambitions. She doesn't want more. Vanessa understands that world. She makes me feel like a big man. Leonard cut in. Like the victim in your own story. Tears stung my eyes, but I blinked them back. I wasn't going to give Ethan the satisfaction of watching me fall apart. I knew about Vanessa, I said quietly. Everyone turned to look at me. I hired a private investigator, I continued. When I heard you on the phone with your mother planning a frank conversation about the future, I figured something was coming. I didn't know your father would corroborate it this way. Ethan stared at me like I'd slapped him. You knew? He said. And you came here anyway? Yes, I said. I wanted to hear what role I was going to play in your little presentation, the lazy wife, the burden. The one holding you back from your exciting life with your morally flexible That's not. His voice cracked. This isn't fair. Fair, Leonard said sharply. Fair would have been ending your marriage before you climbed into bed with someone else. Fair would have been telling us the whole truth when you came crying to us about how hard your life is with your unambitious wife. Diane shook her head slowly, like she was trying to wake herself from a bad dream. I can't believe this, she whispered. Ethan? How could you? I told you, Ethan said desperately. Things weren't working. Clara doesn't want more. I wanted honesty, I said. Apparently, that was too much more for you. Leonard looked at me again, and for the first time since I'd known him, I saw something like shame in his eyes. Clara, he said. I told you on the phone that I thought you were a good person, but not the right match for our son's ambition. I've been thinking, sitting here tonight, that maybe the problem isn't your lack of ambition? He turned back to Ethan. Maybe the problem is your lack of character, Leonard, Diane said sharply. But he held up a hand. No, he said. Our son just tried to publicly humiliate his wife at our table. Tried to make us all accomplices in his justification for leaving her, and he failed to mention the part where he's been cheating on her with a married woman. I won't be part of rewriting the story to make him the noble victim. The room felt smaller, the air thicker. I pushed my chair back and stood up. Thank you for your hospitality, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. And thank you, Leonard, for telling the truth. Clara. Wait. Ethan said, standing up too. We're not done talking about this. We are, I replied. You made your case. Your parents heard it. They also heard mine whether you wanted them to or not. What happens now? He asked, looking a little lost for the first time. Now, I said, I go home. Tomorrow, I call a lawyer. I'll be filing for divorce this week. You can stay at the house until we figure out living arrangements, but I want you in the guest room. Diane pressed her fingers to her lips. Clara, she said, please, can't you two try to work this out? I turned to her. You spent years implying your son deserved better than me because he made more money. I said, you made it very clear where your priorities were. This is one of the outcomes of that. You can figure out the rest with him. Morgan stood up slowly. If you ever need anything, she said quietly, you can call me. Thank you, I said. And I meant it. I picked up my purse, walked out of the perfect dining room in the perfect house on the perfect street, and stepped into the cool evening air. As I closed the front door behind me, I realized something for the first time in a long time. I wasn't the one being weighed. I was the one walking away. The drive home was silent, not the peaceful kind. This was the kind of silence that has shape and weight, the kind that sits in your lap and refuses to move. Ethan gripped the steering wheel so tightly I could see the tendons standing out on the back of his hands. Every streetlight that passed flickered across his face, carving him into sharper and sharper pieces. When we pulled into the driveway, he didn't get out right away. He just sat there breathing too fast, like he was still trying to assemble a version of the night that made sense to him. CL, he finally said. We need to talk. There's nothing left to talk about, I replied, opening my door. He followed me inside. The house felt unfamiliar, like the furniture had shifted in the 2 hours we'd been gone. I headed straight toward the bedroom. Clara, stop, Ethan said, reaching for my arm. I stepped back. Don't. He dropped his hand. I made a mistake, he said. Okay, it was a mistake. It didn't mean anything. You had an affair for 4 months. It wasn't. He stopped, swallowed. It wasn't like that. I was stressed. Vanessa, she understood me. She listened. We connected. So, you slept with her? His jaw flexed. It wasn't serious. I gave a humorless laugh. You know what's funny? You've been treating me like a burden for months, criticizing my job, my income, my ambition, all while you were sneaking around with someone from your past. Because I felt guilty, he snapped. I was trying to justify it. I know that's not an excuse, but I said it's not an excuse. It's cruelty. His face crumpled for the first time. He looked younger, frightened, stripped of his arrogance. Can we fix this? He asked, voice cracking. We can go to counseling. I'll end things with Vanessa. I'll do whatever you want. I'll change. No, I said simply. He stared at me like he hadn't heard correctly. No. You destroyed this marriage, I said. And you don't get to fix it now that you've been caught. He dragged a hand through his hair. Clara, please. You had 4 months to stop, I said. 4 months. You could have confessed. You could have come clean. You could have broken up with me before humiliating me in front of your parents. Instead, you planned a theatrical performance where I was the villain who held you back. He flinched. The only thing that went wrong, I continued, was that your father found the receipts before you could finish your monologue. His shoulders sagged. What happens now? He whispered. I file for divorce. We split assets. You move into the guest room. He swallowed hard. My parents. Your parents know what you did, I said. That's your relationship to repair, not mine. I walked past him and into our bedroom. He stayed in the hallway looking like he didn't know whether to follow or collapse. That night, I packed clothes into a suitcase and carried it into the guest room. I shut the door, turned off the light, and lay awake staring at the ceiling. I wasn't crying. I wasn't shaking. I felt hollow but steady. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was losing my mind. I felt like I was finally waking up. The next morning I made coffee, sat at the kitchen table and called a divorce attorney. Ethan walked in halfway through the call. His eyes were red. He looked like he'd barely slept. Clara. I held up a finger. Yes, I said into the phone. I can come in this afternoon. When I hung up, Ethan sank into the chair across from me. You're really doing this? I am, I said. He pressed the heels of his palms into his eyes. I messed up. Yes, I agreed. You did. I thought. He let out a breath that sounded like defeat. I thought you loved me enough to fight for us. I did love you enough, I said. You didn't love me enough not to betray me. He closed his eyes. That dinner, I added, was the last time you'll ever get to rewrite our story. The next 2 weeks were a strange limbo. Ethan moved into the guest room like I asked. We lived like polite strangers who shared Wi-Fi and avoided eye contact in the hallway. Every day felt eerie. He'd go to work. I'd teach. We'd come home, eat in separate rooms, breathe the same air, but not the same life. One night, I heard him crying softly behind his door. I didn't go in. A week after the dinner, Leonard called. Clara, he said, I owe you an apology. You don't owe me anything, I replied. You exposed what needed to be exposed. I should have trusted my instincts about you. He said, you're a good woman. I let Diane's obsession with status cloud my judgment. I let Ethan's complaints paint a picture of you that wasn't true. I didn't know what to say. I also wanted you to know, he continued, that Ethan has been terminated from his job. I sat up straighter. Fired? Yes. The situation with Vanessa came to light. HR had been watching her for a while. Apparently she'd had similar relationships with other men on the team. Once your husband's involvement became clear, they let them both go. I closed my eyes. Some part of me, the part that had cried silently months earlier when Ethan mocked my salary, felt a cold, grim sense of symmetry. I'm sorry, Leonard said. I wish things had been different. So do I said. But thank you for telling the truth that night. I won't forget it, he replied. 2 weeks into the separation, Diane called. I didn't answer. She sent a text. Can we meet? I'd like to apologize. I stared at it for a long time before replying. Maybe another time. I meant, maybe. I didn't know yet. The divorce moved fast. No kids, no complicated assets. Both of us wanted it over quickly. Ethan because he was drowning in shame. Me because I didn't want to linger in the rubble. The house sold 2 months after we filed. Ethan moved in with his parents temporarily. I moved into an apartment closer to school. It wasn't glamorous. Small kitchen, slightly noisy neighbors, but it was mine. It was quiet, in a way that didn't feel like punishment. 6 weeks after the divorce papers were filed, Diane reached out again. This time, she asked for coffee, not closure. I agreed. We met at a little cafe with mismatched chairs and lattes served in oversized mugs. She looked older than I remembered, softer, like someone had taken the polish to her armor and worn it down. Clara, she said, voice trembling. I need to apologize. Okay, I said gently. For years, she began. I made you feel less than. I implied you weren't good enough for Ethan. I encouraged him to want more. More money, more status, more everything. I pushed that narrative because it's what I was taught. It's what my own mother pushed onto me. She swallowed hard. And I created the environment where Ethan believed he was entitled to judge your worth by your salary. It was strange hearing the truth spoken so plainly. I didn't know about Vanessa, she said. If I had, I would have told him to either fix his marriage or leave it honestly. But I didn't know because I was too busy feeding the story he was telling. I nodded. That sounds difficult to face. It is, she whispered. We're in family therapy now, trying to understand how we raised a son who chose image over integrity. I sipped my latte. I don't hate you, I said finally. But I need a distance. I understand, she replied. And I'm sorry, truly. We sat there for a moment. 2 women connected by grief rather than family. She left alone. I walked out into the afternoon sun and felt something uncoil in my chest. Not forgiveness, not pity, just release. Ethan tried a few more times to contact me after that. A text here, a voicemail there. One night, he knocked on my apartment door. I just want to talk, he said. I opened the door enough to look at him. His face was thinner. His eyes were tired. I'm in therapy, he said, voice unsteady. I'm trying to understand why I did what I did. Why I sabotaged us. And I asked. I felt small. he whispered. At work, at home, everywhere. Vanessa made me feel important. And instead of working on myself, I chased the feeling. I nodded. Do you hate me? He asked. No, I said honestly, but I see you clearly now. He let out a shaky breath. Are you seeing someone? He asked quietly. That's not your business anymore, he nodded. I guess not. I hope you figure yourself out, I said. Truly, Clara, he said softly. You deserve better. Yes, I said simply. I did. He stepped back. Goodbye. Goodbye, Ethan. I closed the door gently. And this time, I felt the finality settle into my bones. 8 months after the dinner that blew my life open, the divorce was finalized. I settled into my little apartment with my books and my plants and my quiet mornings. I coached the debate team. I picked up weekend motorcycle rides, something I'd always wanted to try but never felt cool enough for in Ethan's world. I started sleeping through the night again. I started laughing again. I started becoming someone who didn't care about matching anyone's ambition except her own. Sometimes Leonard texts to check in. Sometimes Morgan calls and we talk about everything except Ethan, but mostly it's just me, my steady life, my steady heart, my steady sense that I am enough. I don't need to prove my worth to anyone. Least of all the man who tried to convince me I had none. 8 months passed, and life began to stretch itself out in quieter, calmer shapes around me. But healing isn't a single sunrise. It's 1,000 small decisions to choose yourself again and again on days when it feels easy, and on days when it feels impossible. Some days I woke up grateful. Other days I woke up angry. But every day I woke up as myself. No apologies, no shrinking. The school year rolled on. My students asked more questions. I gave more thoughtful answers. I started a unit where we compared personal narratives across different wars, how the stories people tell about themselves shift depending on what they need to survive. One afternoon, as a student handed in an essay, she said, "Miss Whitfield, you seem happier this year." I smiled. Maybe the first am. It felt like the truth. On Saturdays, I rode my motorcycle. The first time I pulled onto the open road with the wind pressing against my jacket, I realized something surprising. I wasn't trying to outrun anything. I was learning how to move forward. I'd take long drives out of the city, past quiet fields, through small towns with diners that smelled like syrup and coffee. Sometimes I stopped and wrote little notes to myself, things I wished I'd known sooner. You don't have to make yourself smaller for someone else's comfort. Love isn't a performance review. You deserve to be chosen without needing to audition. These small truths became the ballast I'd been missing. The weight that kept me steady. Every few months, a message from Leonard popped up on my phone. Thinking of you. Hope you're well. I appreciated the gentleness of it. No advice, no excuses, just acknowledgement. Morgan reached out more often. We got lunch sometimes, avoiding the topic of Ethan unless it naturally came up. He's working through some things, she said once, stirring her iced tea. I hope so, I replied. And I meant it. Healing is still healing, even when it happens in houses you've left behind. And then one afternoon in early spring I saw Ethan again. I was leaving the grocery store, keys in hand, when I spotted him standing beside his car. He looked thinner, older, not defeated exactly but softer around the edges. He noticed me and hesitated before lifting a hand and greeting. I walked over. "Hi," he said. "Hi," I replied. There was a long pause, not uncomfortable, just honest. "How are you?" he asked. "I'm good," I said. "Really good," he nodded. "I'm glad." He looked down, then back at me. "I'm in a different job now, not sales, something quieter, more structure. I see a therapist every week. I'm glad for that too." He swallowed. "I think I finally understand how much I hurt you." I didn't respond immediately. Some wounds don't need salt or stitches. They just need acknowledgement. He continued softly. "I'm sorry. Not the panicked kind of sorry I said before. The real kind. I should have said it a year ago." "You're saying it now," I said. "That's something." He exhaled slow. "You look happy." "I am." He gave a small bittersweet smile. "Good. You always deserve better than what I gave you." I nodded. "I hope you find someone who learns that faster." I said gently. He let out a quiet laugh. I'm working on becoming someone who could deserve that. We said goodbye. He didn't ask to stay in touch and I didn't offer. It felt right. Clean, complete. The kind of ending most people don't get. That night, I sat on my apartment balcony with a cup of tea, listening to the low hum of the city and the soft clatter of dishes from a neighbor's window. The air smelled like rain and pavement and new beginnings. I thought about everything I'd walked through, the accusations, the affair, the humiliation, the lawyers, the quiet mornings that felt like punishment until they didn't. I thought about the moment at Leonard and Diane's dinner table when everything cracked open and I finally saw the truth laid bare. And I thought about the woman I had become because of it. Not a burden, not dead weight, not someone to apologize for, just Clara. A woman who fought for herself without raising her voice. A woman who stopped performing for a family that measured worth in dollar signs. A woman who learned that walking away isn't failure, it's liberation. I leaned back in my chair, closed my eyes, and let the warm night air settle around me. Someday, I'll love again. Someday, I'll let someone in. But it will be on my terms with someone who meets me where I stand. Not someone who demands I climb into a life shaped by their insecurities. For now, it's enough to breathe, enough to rebuild, enough to know that my story didn't end at that dinner table.